Well, 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 look who's back. The one and only Ashton Forbes joining me once again here on the Unidentified Alien Podcast. Ashton, it's awesome to have you back. We have a lot to cover. It's been a few months since the last time we spoke, and a lot has happened in those few months. So thanks for coming back on UAP here today.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen, for having me on. I think this is a pretty breaking moment with respect to the case. Yesterday I had a big post that I put out there about solving the mystery of the plane and what happened, and it's been taken off. So you've got the first interview.
Fantastic. Look at that. Well, I appreciate that for sure. The exclusive fun.
Yeah.
MH370 being solved, I guess we could say. So, well, let me start there because I really want to hit on some of the latest developments. And that is the latest development. So, just to kind of touch on that for anybody who didn't see it, you put up a post on X, Twitter, whatever we want to call it these days, and said case solved. Like you've put all the pieces together and you spelled it out ABC. It was very fascinating. I read through the whole thing. So I'll let you take it from there. Where do we stand on that?
Yeah, and so the big break that came up yesterday was one of the final missing puzzle pieces, which was why this plane didn't land in Penang, which all agreed upon flight paths as it flew over. So just as a quick recap, this plane takes off, and within 40 minutes of it taking off from Kuala Lumpur going to Beijing, it goes dark. And we had assumed that this was related to a fire with 487 pounds of lithium-ion batteries. They stuck out like a sore thumb when you look at the cargo of this plane. The Malaysian Airlines CEO had lied about the cargo until March 20th, well after they started to develop the South Indian Ocean narrative. And then they came out and said, oh, yeah, there's this really dangerous lithium-ion batteries that are on this plane. And you can imagine why they would lie about it, because if you tell people right after the plane goes missing, oh, yeah, there's 500 pounds of lithium-ion batteries in the cargo, people are going to be like, okay, that had to be what happened. And that's exactly what did happen. 19 witnesses corroborate this event. Mike McKay sees it on an oil rig on fire. He gets discredited. He gets fired. There's 9 people on the coast heard loud noises at the same time. The batteries we found out were in the forward cargo bay right next to the electronics bay, which could help explain why this plane goes dark when they ignite. And then the plane turns back around. And we've recently, over about a month ago, I want to say, some of the investigative experts were able to determine from the radar pings that this plane attempted an emergency descent right after that, which is exactly consistent with what you would do in a fire scenario. And this completely, in my opinion, rules out any type of suicidal pilot scenario, because if you were trying to asphyxiate everybody, you would depressurize the plane and fly to a very high altitude. And then that way people would succumb very quickly. But if you're flying to a low altitude under 10,000 feet, which is what the plane did, then that's because the fire in the halon fire extinguishing devices are sucking oxygen out of the plane. So what you're trying to do there is you're trying to give them enough oxygen to breathe and intentionally depressurize the plane to get outside oxygen to come in.
Which explains why, real quick, why the witness on the oil rig was able to see that, right? Because it was flying at a lower altitude, not at 30 or 35,000.
Generally, it's going to be better at higher altitude, because the problem here, people say, well, he's too far away, almost 300 nautical miles, but there was perfect clear conditions. It just rained. And when you live in Southeast Asia, there's really bad haze. So like when it rains, it like really improves the visibility and conditions. So he probably would have seen it at a cruising altitude, somewhere around 35,000 feet. But then there was 8 fishermen on a boat 10 minutes later after the plane turns around. They see it at low altitude. And all of them get discredited. I don't even know how they discredit those people. They just ignore them. They say, no, whatever. Even though they're like literally on the flight path of where the plane turned around, everybody agrees. And they see the plane flying low. And the plane turns back, does a direct beeline to Penang. Now, the pilot also takes manual control. They know this turn of the pilot was a manual turn. It was not the autopilot that made that turn, because it's a harder bank than what you would normally do. So again, this would indicate some kind of emergency event. Going to Penang, that's the closest airport you would go to in a fire emergency. Some would argue you might maybe want to go back to Kuala Lumpur, where you came from. But Penang is slightly closer, slightly better terrain, but it would probably be a judgment call at that point. When the plane gets to Penang, like 20, 30 minutes later, and you can understand why it's the right thing to do, is because you can't just land like right away. Like when you're in an aircraft, it's not like I'm just going to put the plane down like anywhere. You know, you've got to have like a path to get to where you're trying to go. And so that's why Penang is the most logical location. The plane gets there, and we know it was flying low because the co-pilot's cell phone pings a cell tower. You have to be under like 7,000 feet for that. So this plane was flying pretty low. Now, the missing link was from actually Jeff Wise. Jeff Wise has actually given us some of the best evidence, even though he's just full CNN brain and like is certain somehow that Russia took this plane.
Hmm.
His blog talks about that you can't dump fuel if you have no power, and there was a comment in there in his blog as well where somebody else was pointing this out, and I went, "Oh, that's why they couldn't land the plane, because they had too much fuel in the plane." Now, I've
Mm.
flown millions of miles. I've lived overseas. I used to fly every single week for my job. And there were several times where we would have to land like prematurely or something, and they would have to burn excess fuel before they could land because you have a maximum landing weight. This plane had 8 hours plus of fuel on it. And we
Mm.
know that because the flight path says the plane flew for 8 hours and ran out of fuel. And this was only an hour, less than an hour into the flight. Or like if you add the Penang time, it's maybe about an hour. So they've got 7 hours of excess fuel. They're way overweight.
Mm.
So they've got to dump that fuel before they can land. And if they can't because they lost power due to the fire, due to the equipment center, electronics bay being damaged, then this prevents them from doing that. So the next thing you would do is potentially try to land on your belly, but you can't do that either. You've got 7 hours of fuel in your plane. You're going to explode.
Mm.
So the next thing you're supposed to do is land in the ocean. And then here's the thing is, well, where are you going to land in the ocean? First of all, the fuel situation is also a problem. So you might need to burn excess fuel before you even want to risk the ocean landing. But at the same time, you're battling the fire, and the fire, you're only going to be able to keep it at bay for so long. Even an hour or so is extremely dangerous. So this is the part where we've been able to conclude they must have had communications, because there was a B777 pilot who was flying in Narita who heard the plane at the same time those people on the boat saw the plane flying low 10 minutes after it went dark, which tells us there had to be some communications. If they hear, even if it was static, that they were able to make out the pilot or co-pilot's voice, had to be some communication. Malaysian Minister of Defense, in his interview he did with Four Corners, sketchiest interview ever. I think we've talked about it in the past, but he gave away the game. He said that the military knew the plane was not hostile. That's why they didn't send up a jet. And they should have sent one up anyway just to track it. It made no sense why they wouldn't send a jet up. But once you realize they had to have had communications with the plane, then you realize why they did not send up the jet. You realize why they knew the plane wasn't hostile. That's the only way you could know it wasn't a hijacking scenario or suicidal pilot scenarios, if you have communications with them. They've classified those communications. That's the only logical conclusion. And then you can assume that, okay, well, if there were some communications, U.S. military could have been involved in those communications, and they developed a rendezvous point. They said, okay, you're going to attempt an ocean landing. It's an emergency event or whatever. Here's the location. Location being the coordinates we see in the satellite video, the Nicobar Islands, the same location where Catherine T sees it. So they also lied probably about the radar, saying that the last radar contact was 1822 UTC. This is like 350 miles away from the coordinates that we see. And we know that because the day after the plane disappeared, all the news reports said that Subang Air Traffic Control lost contact with the plane at 1840 UTC, not 1822. Why would they say they lost contact at 1840? And the answer is they had to develop a cover story, so they changed it and said, no, not 1840, 1822, 320 miles away. Because if people are able to have an accurate time frame, they're going to figure out this plane was over the Nicobar Islands near where our coordinates are. This is where Catherine T sees it. This is where she sees the glowing orange plane, smoke coming out of the back of it, flying low, descending. Also, what she thought was potentially performing an emergency landing maneuver. This is corroborated by a Mayday call in the China Times that I found a link to the subreddit World News from the day after the plane went missing that said at 2:43, which when you convert that, assuming it's Malaysian time, is 1843 UTC, within 5 minutes of Catherine T's sighting, 5 minutes of the Subang Air Traffic Control saying that they lost contact with the plane, that the plane was attempting an emergency landing and descending. And this is China. Only China was reporting this because the Western media is covering it up. China's reporting it because they know something sketchy happened. And they're going like, we intercepted this communication. We know you're lying. And then this is where the videos then come in, is that we've got this plane, we've got it on fire, we've got attempted emergency landing. And then we have two perfectly in sync military videos showing a plane with smoke coming out of the back of it, flying low, descending, and doing a turn maneuver as well, which is what you're going to be trying to do to slow down to, if you're going to try to land in the ocean. One option would be try to land straight like this. Another option is you're trying to spin around and slow yourself down and touch down. And so people ask, well, if it's a fire event, all right, what's the deal with the orbs in the videos? No, the orbs in the videos, it proves that. We could never figure this out without these videos, because the videos corroborate that event. They tell the true story of the plane. And then the only question is, well, what's the then motive and situation around it? Is the
Right.
United States trying to save the plane after it accidentally like started on fire, or if you believe the aliens are saving the plane, whatever. I mean, the fact that we're filming it on 2 cameras to me says that it's our tech, it's our operation. But then the other option is, well, this is some type of espionage or counter espionage, where this was a plan from the beginning. We put the batteries on there. We ignited the batteries at the very specific location that was that weak point between the radars to divert it away from China and back to the west near where our assets are. We might have even remote controlled it based on what the French father was told about these AWACS. And we get it to the rendezvous location, however we have to get it there. And then we, zap it away. We want our adversaries to see in that scenario, because it's a message to them. We're saying like, hey, you're trying to take our engineers, and then, this is what happens if you keep trying to do that. And the reason why that is a very prominent theory is that superconductors and semiconductors are like the basis for the technology we see in those videos, in addition to plasma physics. And the other thing is that 8 of these people were Chinese nationals. The Freescale Semiconductor employees, 8 of them were Chinese nationals, 12 were Malaysian nationals. They're working for an American company. This is the #1 target for espionage and intellectual property theft, is foreign nationals working for American companies. Cost the United States somewhere around $600 billion per year from our companies. So if these people had developed some of this technology, very advanced superconductors, microchips, things like that, then this would be the reason why you could justify from the military perspective of doing this type of operation, which is extremely high risk. And if you get caught doing this, and you got some pretty tough explanations to put out there. But the last thing I would say is that I think that even if we were to admit that we did this, the United States, I think that most of America would say, yeah, well, that was justified. And that's kind of the scariest part to me. So that's the story. Yes, I still believe that everything we see in those videos is real. I think that we could never figure it out without those videos being real. And I'm at this point about as certain as you can be that the United States government has literal working warp drive capabilities.
And it's, well, first of all, wow. It's a lot of pieces to put together there, and you've been working on this for close to a year, if not a year by now, I believe. And, to just sit back and consider all of that still is mind blowing to me. I think this is the 4th time we've been on the show together, and every single conversation that we have still blows my mind. I never get used to hearing this stuff, because just to kind of think about what this would mean, right? If everything that you have put forward over almost the past year can be proven to be true without a shadow of a doubt, what does this mean for the world when it comes to the technology, when it comes to this happened 10 years ago, everything that is involved with this, that the U.S. government would be involved with this and taking the plane or its inhabitants to, we assume someplace like, Diego Garcia is where we assume, because a lot of people ask, well, where did they go? So, I mean, what would this all mean if, ultimately someone comes out and says, Ashton got it right?
Yeah. It would mean a lot. I mean, that we are entering Star Trek age, for one, and then potentially we've already been there. Like you said, this was 10 years ago, and we had technology like this. There's a lot of questions that have to be answered in terms of how long we've had this, how long it's been kept secret from us. We definitely didn't start having floaty orbs that can warp an aircraft away. This started with something more rudimentary than that. So how long have they really been developing this behind the scenes? And one thing, because I looked at these Defense Intelligence Agency papers, I would speculate that we've probably figured out how to manipulate space-time somewhere in the early 2000s based on this, that this isn't the first attempt, but this isn't, it's not like it's something we've potentially had for 100 years. Although I think the basis, the science for this has been out there for a long time, which I think is something called scalar physics. Something that I think a lot of mainstream physicists would say, oh, well, that's mumbo jumbo, but I think we can pretty much prove that it's real. Directed energy weapons are based on this type of science. As well as probably some other pretty advanced stuff that we're going to be finding out about in the future here as well. Like fusion power, I think, can help be explained by some of this, as well as just straight up free energy. And this goes back to Thomas Bearden, who was talking about this all the way back in the 80s, 38 years ago. And this is where the idea of macroscopic phase conjugation, which is the technical science term for warp drive something,
Yeah.
That's where all of this comes from, which is the idea that Maxwell's equations, James Clerk Maxwell, he wrote the electromagnetic equations back like almost 100 years ago, I want to say. And Oliver Heaviside came in and reduced his 20 equations down to 4. And when he did that, we lost the ability to manipulate gravity. And this is where I think we kind of hamstrung ourselves with respect to science. And this is why we've struggled for so long to understand quantum mechanics and understand the idea of dark matter and dark energy and what those types of things mean. If we bring back Nikola Tesla's ether, the extra dimension of unlimited negative energy, I think we can solve easily dark energy at a minimum, which is the idea of, well, how does the universe expand faster than the speed of light during the Big Bang? Well, the answer is because the universe isn't just something that came out of nothing. It's the paint on which the canvas is, the paint on top of the canvas, and the canvas itself would be the ether. And then dark energy is the pressure between those two mediums that's always happening. And this can explain how we have stuff like quantum fluctuations in the vacuum. And what's the other one that they say? I can't think of it off the top of my head right now, but it'll come to me. The quantum or the virtual particles that they say. When you think about that, you're like, what does that actually mean, though? Like something's just appearing out of nothing? Well, no. The answer is that there's an extra dimension, the ether, that's got unlimited negative energy, and you're seeing the interactions between the fabric, canvas, and our reality itself. And we don't perceive it all the time because it's like when we look at a painting, we don't see the canvas when we look at the painting, but that doesn't mean the canvas isn't there. All we have to do is rip off the paint, and then we can see the canvas underneath. This is exactly what we're seeing in the MH370 videos. That's why these videos are the most important videos in the history of the world, is that if we produce a strong enough electric charge, like we see these orbs doing when they converge, consistent with Coulomb's law, they're literally ripping through the fabric of reality there. They're breaking the Schwinger limit, causing the area there to become nonlinear, which is the idea of a wormhole. And if you look at the DIA papers, they perfectly, these are papers from 2010 that are warp drive, dark energy, and manipulation of extra dimensions. And
I was just about to ask you about that, actually. I'm glad you brought it up, because when it comes to those papers, you actually, it was fascinating. I popped into one of your Twitter live streams not too long ago, and you were showing some of these papers. They're readily available, I mean, on government sites. So talk about some of these government sites, these government agencies that actually have these studies published on how this
Defense Intelligence Agency. So Defense Intelligence Agency, the former director of Defense Intelligence Agency is General Flynn. And a lot of people, I think he's been attacked. My opinion is that a lot of disinformation has been used against him to discredit him. He follows me on Twitter. Okay, so why is there a former general who is the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency following me on Twitter, especially if these videos are fake? Just think about that for a second. And then why do we have Defense Intelligence Agency papers? One of them's warp drive, dark energy, manipulation of extra dimensions.
That's
the other one is
in there, right?
Yeah, it's been there since. I mean, I don't know when it was declassified, but it says it has a 2010 date on it. So this is 4 years before the plane disappeared as well.
Say the title one more time, because I really want to highlight that this paper is in there.
Yeah, warp drive, dark energy, and manipulation of extra dimensions. I mean, I couldn't ask for a better paper that just literally lays out exactly what we see in the videos. And I remember looking and seeing that paper beforehand, but just like when you're not woken up, you just think like, oh, this is just some thing somebody wrote. But you realize like these are like government engineers and scientists and physicists writing these papers. These aren't just rando dudes on the street putting their thoughts on the paper. Like, and these are people that would be in the know for this type of stuff. And I'll get to the implications of that in a sec. The second one is traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energy. And there's a connection between negative energy and dark energy. They might be one and the same. The ether can explain both of them. Is that just simply the pressure in the medium? And gravity itself is just a stress in the medium, which there's a quick explanation I like to use, which is explains how we've screwed up and lost how to manipulate gravity, which is that in physics, if I were to take two forces and I pull on both sides here, physics would say, well, there's equal and opposite forces here. If you cancel it out, it means there's zero. The sum total of the vector is zero here. So pull equal, and I can pull equally a little bit harder, like twice as hard, and the sum total is still zero. I can pull 4 times as hard or 3 times as hard, and the sum total is still zero. But if I keep pulling this rubber band's going to snap in half. because there's a stress here in the medium. The stress in the medium of space-time is gravity. And so that's what we forgot about, is that we said, oh, well, if you just zero these out and cancel each other out, then there's nothing left. But it's not that there's nothing left. There's still something left. The stress is still left. This is what happened when we reduced Maxwell's equations, or Oliver Heaviside did. And this is why everybody in school gets taught Maxwell's equations and they can't figure out how to manipulate gravity. Now we think it's just magical that's out there. So these papers, I think these papers, and I have reviewed them, I probably will end up reviewing them again. They explain everything that we see in the MH370 videos. They explain a traversable wormhole, and that the difference between a traversable wormhole and a black hole, because a lot of people say, well, was Don Lemon right about the videos saying that, MH370 was sucked in a black hole? There's no event horizon on the mouth of a wormhole. And what that means is the event horizon on a black hole is the area where not even light can escape anymore.
Right.
So that if you go past that event horizon, you can knock it out. There's no possible way that you can get out. On a wormhole, there is no event horizon. So you can go through it. What this means is that they're humanly traversable. And if you Google humanly traversable wormholes, you're going to find like 3 or 4 different scientific papers. One of which was written by Juan Naldacena, who is also the person who's the proponent of ER equals EPR with Leonard Susskind, which is that a wormhole is fundamentally equivalent to quantum entanglement, and that this is how we can unify general relativity and quantum field mechanics. And I don't think a lot of this is a coincidence. I think the public science is getting very close to having figured it out. I think that all these concepts are 100% on the money. And I think that these papers exist as plausible deniability, so that when this stuff comes out, and I don't think they plan on having this come out anytime soon. Like, if I hadn't been doing this, I think that 2030 could go by and they still wouldn't talk about it. But let's say we get to 2040 or 2050. And all of a sudden, it becomes undeniable. Like some other events happen, the warp drive gets shown again, and they go, "Well, no, we had these papers back in 2010. We weren't lying. Why do you think we wrote all those papers?" And then everybody in the world go, "Oh, okay, yeah, you wrote these papers. You weren't lying to us." And that's what I think that is plausible deniability.
Right.
That's why they can say they weren't lying about having the technology. It's like, no, we had them. You just didn't pay any attention to them. You didn't think that they were real. So.
Man, it's just again, it's just so huge to consider. I mean, this is life-changing stuff. This is world-changing stuff that people don't walk around in their everyday life thinking about. But you've been tackling it, and you've gained quite the following while putting the stuff out there. And I think, again, one of the big questions was, well, where did the plane go? I want to add on to that, because we've talked about Diego Garcia, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's a super secret military installation. It is a real base. People really do work there. It's not some, ghost story. It's a real place in that area of where, MH370 was, within the vicinity anyway. So not only where did it go, but how do you, and maybe we don't have the answer for this, but how do you direct a wormhole? So if they are going to Diego Garcia and MH370 gets, warped in that moment, how is it made sure that they're going to reappear on the other end of the wormhole at Diego Garcia?
Yeah, the answer again is science, but I don't think it showed up directly at Diego Garcia. And I think that even if we have this kind of technology, it's not just unlimited. We're not to the point where we're beaming you up from one location and putting you down anywhere we want. Now, I think we will potentially get there, but that's the thing where I want people to understand is even after we get this Star Trek level technology, we still have all this further to advance it. It's like the 3-body problem in terms of going from being able to, move faster than the speed of light to then actually being able to have something very tiny that can do it. I think the secret there is entanglement. But again, some of this is going to be somewhat speculative, but it's based on science. First thing I want to say is that the best location we have for it is somewhere near the Maldives, because that's west of where we see the coordinates. And when we see the plane go through this wormhole, it looks like it gets sucked back in the frame, the very first frame compared to the wormhole compared to the frame right beforehand. We can see that the orbs bend consistent with some type of lensing effect, which is another thing that those papers talk about. And then the plane goes backwards a little bit, not much, but a little bit. And this is important because if you're looking at the plane front on and you look at the orientation and the spin of the orbs, they're creating a torus around the plane, which is a donut shape. And they're spinning in a clockwise. For you guys, it'll be this way is clockwise. For me, it's this way. But anyway, clockwise is important because if that's your magnetic vector, your magnetic field, you use the right hand rule. and you curl your vector, what you get then is you're going to have a situation where you're going to have the electromagnetics would say the vector potential of your electromagnetic wave or field you're creating would be backwards. And so this is actually the direction of travel going backwards is actually consistent with electromagnetics as well. So if somebody faked these videos, they put in a lot of crazy details about consistent with science and electromagnetics. Now, what we had speculated, and this goes to my friend Dave Rossi, who's a DoD contractor and engineer himself, and Thomas Bearden, who has passed away a couple of years ago that I wish I would have been able to meet, is that what we're seeing is macroscopic phase conjugation. And so what's happening is that we can create scalar potentials, which is the stress in the medium, aka gravity, by canceling out our electromagnetic waves. So if we do what I was saying before, we cancel the electric and magnetic potential out. So we create two opposite waves that completely cancel each other out. It's not that there's nothing left. Remember, there's the stress of the mediums left. That's the scalar potential. That's our gravitational manipulation. So what we're going to do is and if we do that, we could do that with 2 points, right? This is like if I'm pulling on both sides, that's a 0-point system like this. But there's another way to create a 0-point system like this, an equilateral triangle. An equilateral triangle is a 0-point system. What do we see when we look at the MH370 videos? An equilateral triangle being formed around them by their orbs. What they're doing is they're focusing their beams directly on the center mass of the plane. This creates a perfect cancellation of those electromagnetic waves that they're shooting at it, which creates something called a pump system. So these waves are acting like the pump system. The triangle is, and that's why they're converging together to increase the electromagnetic force based on Coulomb's law, which says that as the distance of the charges reduces, the force increases exponentially. And now we know that we have the right-hand rule, which sends us our vector backwards. Now, Dave and other people would also argue that there's a fourth orb. And so that what you've done is you entangle one of those orbs, or those three orbs over here, let's say, to a fourth orb somewhere over here back to the west. And that can then control exactly like where it shows up. Because otherwise, how far is it going to go? Is it just going to keep going to the west forever? It needs to stop at some point.
Right.
And so you have that Coulomb's law occur where you have these orbs converging and then poof, snap. Now they all show up with the plane somewhere over here. And to me, I think, well, that's magic, right? But at the same time, you could imagine it get even crazier where it's like, well, why not send it to the Andromeda Galaxy or to the moon or somewhere else? And I think in the future, we could potentially get that far. But for now, there might even be line of sight issues. I don't know. The thing is, we don't have two videos on the other side to know exactly where it shows up. But we do have a B777 fire suppression device that washes up in the Maldives. Gets falsely reported on as a bomb because it looks like a cartoon bomb, and they just completely dismiss it. And then we also have 20 islanders that see the plane several hours later coming from the west and then flying south towards Diego Garcia. 20 islanders on a small island of 3,000 people. They don't see jumbo jets, and they can make out the red and white stripe on the plane. So based on this, we say, okay, the plane somehow warped somewhere over to the west. Maybe it landed, and then they took care of the fire, and then they take off again and fly towards Diego Garcia. I can't say. I'm not psychic. I don't have remote viewing capabilities or anything like that. But I respect people that do have that stuff. That's awesome. But for me, I can only say what I know for sure, which is what we see in those videos and the corroborating evidence that leads up to it. So that's macroscopic phase conjugation. It's still pinned to my tweet and my profile if anyone wants to read it and see it. I would say the only thing that's even in question from a scientific perspective is like, well, can we really create a gravitational wave? Because if we can create a gravitational wave, then you can understand how this thing is happening. And I think that's why I show the whole stuff and talk about the stuff about Maxwell and the stress in the medium so that people can see conceptually how that can be done.
Well, I hope you all were taking notes because there's going to be a test at the end of this. It's really fascinating stuff, Ashton. Let me, to say the least, let me look at it from the other angle with you. And this is actually a question that came from Twitter. I had put out the day before this interview. Hey, going to be talking to Ashton again on UAP. If you have any questions you want me to throw his way, feel free. And I found this one interesting. Someone said, ask him if, and I wish I had the name in front of me. I want to give him the credit, but I don't have the name in front of me. They said, ask him if he was a debunker, right? Because you've explained everything from your end, how you looked at it, how, you said you've figured this out and you've done a great job explaining. You laid out all those details. But they said, if you were looking at it at the angle of the debunkers, the people who come at you and say Ashton's a fake, Ashton's a fraud, Ashton's a grifter, he's just, trying to make money off of this, or he's, these are easily debunked through visual effects programs. If you were coming at it from that end, how would you try to explain something like this?
Yeah, and I would go about it a completely different way. I would be a great debunker and skeptic, and maybe I will be in the future. Because for me, I people think, well, you're biased. It's not that I'm biased. It's that I've got a case here that's extremely compelling with respect to the amount of evidence that comes along with it. I approach it from the scientific method perspective. So if I'm a debunker, and I tell the debunkers exactly what I'm going to say right now, which is that I would develop a comprehensive story for who faked it and how they faked it, not just, oh, this thing here is a video game graphic, like that's not a story. That's just you making an assertion. That's just you speculating. What's
Mm,
the evidence? What's the hard evidence? So like the VFX stuff, I think is just kind of a joke, because people literally, what they're saying is that it looks nothing alike, but if I change it all around, then it looks alike. Like, that's not logic. That's not a reason. That's just rank speculation, baseless speculation. Like, what are the real facts? If I was a debunker, I would be trying to find the hoaxer. That would be my only goal out there.
mm,
And if I thought there was any chance these were hoaxed, I would be doing that. I would have taken that $150,000 that we had for that bounty that was up there. I could use that money. People will
sure.
talk about turning down money and what have you. I'm like, nah, like, crap, guys. I'm not like that rich. Like, I will take like any money that people want to throw at me. I don't ask for money, but
Right.
geez, And that's the thing, is that if the this cloud debunk, if that cloud debunk, this 2D picture, which we can't have a 2D picture. We've got two videos from different perspectives. We've got volumetric clouds that are moving and evolving. We can actually line up the videos and see the same clouds in both videos. And we've got the zap, this flash that happens, which, by the way, that's consistent with those papers as well. That says, like, when you have this wormhole happen, the photons, the light that hits it, like accumulates around the wormhole's mouth, and then it creates a flash of light. And I
Mm,
read that and went, holy crap. But anyway, like, we've got all this, which basically proves that if they are fake, they require a 3D rendered environment. So for people to deny that basic reality, like, goes to show that people are really grasping at straws and reaching. Because you should start there and say, okay, someone's a 3D rendered environment. I'd say the next thing is regicide anon the hoaxer? And this is what I asked one of the debunkers on on a space I was on last night. Because if regicide's not the hoaxer, then why does it say received March 12th, 2014 in their description? That narrows the window down a lot. Like, this is how, if you're approaching it from an investigative standpoint, trying to find the person who hoaxed it, these are the questions you should be asking right away. Not like, oh, I think this looks like video games. I think I could have created this in 5 minutes. And if it is a 2D cloud picture from this obscure website in 2014, and we've already shown that that cloud image is not in any torrents, that means it had to have been downloaded from that website. Then I would be reaching out to that website owner every day saying, give me a list of the people
mm,
that download this image in a 70-day window from an obscure website. It's got to be less than 5 people. So
yeah.
one of those people theoretically would have to be the hoaxer. Like, that's the only thing skeptics should be looking at. That's what I would be doing. And this is the scientific method. This is how you do, like, a true investigation, not speculating and saying this must be this, and without any actual basis for it. It's following the evidence, following the facts.
And I think that's a good point to touch on. By the way, real quick, the person who asked that question was Aaron Johnson at Big Cherry 1515. So I just wanted to give him credit on the question that they posed there. And something that you mentioned, I think, is pretty striking. I think it's something that people forget sometimes. You didn't put out this video. People I think have this idea when they question it, when they try to debunk, when they say, Ashton's, faking this. It's not like you were the first one to put out this video. And I think people forget that this was on YouTube 10 years ago. Right. And this was just a few days after the disappearance. And you mentioned the name of the regicide anon of the man, Edward C. Lynn, who we think that's who it is. And he ended up going to jail. And we think, I know you put those 2 and 2 together there, that he would be the one that leaked it because of his background and how he went to jail for leaking secrets and everything. So I think people need to kind of keep that in perspective first, that this isn't an Ashton Forbes production. This was out there 10 years ago. I think that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's not my videos. People do say that, like, oh, your videos. I was like, no, they just appeared on social media. And I remember seeing one in 2014 and was like, whoa, that is crazy. And then you look at it and you see the second video and you start digging into the evidence. You're like, wait, there's a Citrix session. You can see the mouse at 24 frames per second, and we can see these coordinates in the bottom screen. Like, this is already, for me, I was like, okay, this is way too much. Like, this has got to be real. Nobody's faking all these crazy details. Like a real remote terminal login to a completely unknown satellite capabilities with a satellite designation and coordinates that are accurate to 6 degrees. Like, it's just, that was a lot. And so anyone could have done this. Absolutely. You know, and I'm just the guy that really put myself out there. And that's what it sometimes it takes, is like, you tie your real name to it, you do an investigation, you dig into it. And I didn't know what we would get to through this investigation. I didn't know we would find out about this whole fire scenario. I had no idea about the fire scenario before this started. And now I've got a post out there with over 2 million views, basically saying we've proven that the fire scenario is real. And then with respect to the Edward C. Lin thing, I want to talk a little bit about this because I'm not going to go into all the details about Edward C. Lin, but I will say, like, if you look at the case around him, I'm like 99% sure this is the guy. Like, he's all the dates and times, his rank, his position, being on the spy planes, defense saying that classified information questions available on the internet. I think that the way it probably played out was that he leaked that to somebody he trusted, potentially maybe one of his Taiwanese contacts, and they put it on the internet, and they gave it to like Regicide Anon or some UFO forum or something like that. I think there was like somebody in the middle that happened, because I think that's why his defense said the classified information and questions available on the internet, is that they're saying that he's not the one who directly leaked it out there. He gave it to somebody else that he trusted that they wouldn't leak it. And I also think that explains why they tried to run a sting operation on him. And if you look at some of his case, you find out that he was like, he had kind of a big mouth and he was saying stuff about stuff that he probably shouldn't. But you can imagine if you're in the military, people do that. You know, they tell their friends like, hey, somebody told me a story where like my buddy got really drunk and he was in the military, and this happened 15 years ago. And he calls me one night wasted, and he's like, we can teleport stuff. You know, like that kind of things happen, right? And that was a crazy story too, because that guy was like, dude, after you did this investigation, like I now think that guy was telling me the truth. So that's kind of how I think it played out. But honestly, at the end of the day, like I'm starting to get to the point where I think I need to find Edward C. Lin. Like I didn't want to do this, and I don't want to go there, because if these videos are real, he might be in danger. And I don't want to harass him. And I truly think that he's my hero when it comes to, you know, disclosure and what have you. But he's the only one who can prove beyond any doubt that these videos are real. And I'm afraid that AARO, who I've given all this information to, is I think I might have spooked them now. I might have red pilled a few people as well, because since their last communication, which was almost a month ago, April 11th, where they said that they found something that the United States government was something about the search efforts after the plane went off radar. They've just ghosted me since then. And like I can imagine why, because if these videos are real and they were able to look into Edward C. Lin and find out he leaked the videos, boy, there's a lot of, that's like, what can you even tell me? Like, you have to just go quiet if that's the case. Otherwise, why wouldn't they just come back and be like, no, he didn't leak the videos. No, we looked at, that's not how an MQ-1C Gray Eagle looks like. No, that's not what our cyber system looks like. Like, those are pretty simple answers to come back and just say that. And they didn't. Like, in fact, I don't think I've read this. I want to read this to you too, because this was one of the most mind-blowing things that I think happened to me in general with getting this response. I expected them just to lie to me or gaslight me or something, because you guys know what AARO's kind of the way people look at them. They think they're just full of crap, but pretty much, I think they're just normal people. This response, Mr. Forbes, my apologies for the slow responses. AARO is researching several topics at the moment. Some of AARO's initial research into MH370 has revealed the U.S. government's search efforts after the airliner disappeared from radar. I believe the genesis and authenticity of the videos may be helpful. Can you confirm the dates the videos were posted to the Regicide Anon YouTube channel? And yes, a quick follow-up call may be helpful. I'm like, what?
Mind-blowing, yeah.
Like, that should be like the biggest news out. That's probably the biggest break in MH370 in general, like over the last maybe even 10 years. Like that says the United States government knows something. They've got some classified information about this plane. And the reason why that's so important is we searched for 3 years in the South Indian Ocean, found nothing down there. So, like, does the United States know what happened to this plane or not? Like, we've pretty much shown they must know what happened to this plane. Whether or not you think those videos are real, they've got to know. So what the hell are they hiding? So, and why would AARO have it be within their remit, as people say, to look into a missing airliner at all, unless we've got this crazy anomalous anti-gravitational space-time warping capability on video? So crazy, huh?
It sure is. I have a feeling that, in some ways, we're kind of just beginning this. I feel like there's that this investigation and the results of it, or the, you know, repercussions of it, are kind of just starting to pick up, because you've really gained a lot of steam with this over the past couple months, specifically. I mean, as far as people who have taken notice, you were just on Glenn Beck last week, or about, yeah, last week or so, and spoke to on the Glenn Beck show for about 15 minutes. I mean, that's a big national show. You got attention from the Hodge twins, which have a big following on social media. They've been reposting the videos. Elon Musk responded to one, kind of, denying it, saying that, we don't think that aliens are real at SpaceX. But the point that you were making was, well, this isn't aliens. So, I mean, even like Elon Musk, you've got Elon's attention, Ashton. So if Elon is listening to this, or the Hodge twins, if they put it out, what would you say if you were talking to Elon right now about this?
Yeah, the Elon thing is super weird because he 100% knows about me. There's no way he doesn't. I'm like, got to be one of the fastest rising people on his platform. I'm saying the craziest stuff more than anybody else. You got the Hodge twins reposting it. I had Kim.com previously supporting it. Who knows Elon? There's no way he's not familiar with it. And he gets asked, like, well, what's going on with this? And if he had read any of my stuff, he should know that I'm talking about U.S. government tech. And he puts like a copy and paste thing, which is like, oh, we've got 6,000 satellites and we haven't seen any aliens. And
Right.
Hodgman's even replying, and they're like, that's not what he's saying at all. Like, Elon's a smart guy.
Yeah.
So for him to make like a dodge statement like that, it's almost like a politician, like ignoring the question. And the fact that Elon has A, that he's a billionaire, and that also B, he's got defense contracts. He almost certainly has an NDA that he can't speak out about our capabilities.
Sure.
That scares me a little bit, because then it makes me wonder, like, does he actually know? I didn't think he knew, but now I'm thinking maybe he does know. And what scares me about that is that he talks about interstellar, us being an interstellar species. I clip a lot of his stuff when he does podcasts, especially with Joe Rogan, talking about how we can travel, how we can figure out how to travel faster than the speed of light. There's one where he says, we know there must be a way because we know the Big Bang expanded, space expanded faster than the speed of light, which is dark energy, negative energy, the same thing I was talking about, the ether. So it's like, how would he not be interested in this? It scares me, and it really scares me because I've been told from people that I trust very highly that a lot of elite people know about this stuff. They know that free energy is real. They have some of these engineers that work for the government produce for them free energy devices, like a device that can just is a generator that just doesn't even need to be, you plug it in and can unplug it, and it can run your entire house or bunker or whatever you need it to do. And that, yes, they probably cost a decent amount of money, but it's not like an unfathomable amount of money, like maybe like $100,000, not like millions of dollars.
Right.
And then when you think about it from that perspective, you think, oh, well, okay, this kind of explains everything. It's like the elites and the special club of people that know, and then the people that don't. And, they don't trust us with this technology and stuff like that. So what would I say to Elon, though? The answer to Elon would be like, I've got the answers here, man. And not just to Elon, but like all the scientists and physicists that are out there. I think that a lot of these people are extremely condescending because they think that only stuff can be true is what they've been slowly accumulating through papers. But we know there's something wrong. We have to come up with terms like dark energy and dark matter because we don't see what that stuff is and we can't explain it. So there must be something else. And so these scientists and physicists, they work this way. They go, okay, here's the newest revelation. Here's the newest paper, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking at the answers over here and I'm going backwards. I'm reverse engineering it, going, okay, here's the wormhole. We can see it happening. It's corroborated by a real event. It's corroborated by more evidence than most murder cases get. And then how can that be possible? What does that mean? Oh, well, it means we screwed up when we reduced the Maxwell equations. Like, we can explain like every aspect of it. And I think this is where the resurgence has come from in the case, where it took me way less time to figure out the science than I thought. I thought, like a lot of people that look at this, they go, well, that's unknowable how that works. We can't know how that works. It must be alien technology. It took me less than 6 months as a normal dude with no formal education and any of the science stuff to like figure out and be able to explain logically, intuitively exactly how it works. And, I think if you give me another 6 months, who knows how far we'll be able to get with that. So there is, in my opinion, a Nobel Prize waiting for the first prominent physicist or wherever who comes out and shows that, yes, like there is an ether which can explain dark energy. They look at these papers and go, yes, we can do warp drive. And yes, what we're seeing in those videos is possibly the first ever high definition recorded endothermic event or wormhole ever seen in human history. Now, there might be other ones out there that are classified or something like that, but this is the first one that's like in the public purview. And it took us almost 10 years of it being out in the public to even grasp that like it could even possibly be real, which shows like we have to raise our collective conscious to a point where like we can even begin to understand this kind of advanced technology. And to me, that's the missing link in UFOlogy, which is that the technology is so advanced that we can't even comprehend it to be real until, you know, we get to a certain point where the science starts to catch up. And then some random dude on Twitter is like, wait a minute, can this be real? Let me dig through it. And then find out, oh yeah, it can be.
And you just turned out to be the random dude. So here we
In
are.
this case, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. In a year later. And it's really something. I want to get you out of here on this. And this is something that actually I was thinking about last night. And it's kind of pulled back the curtain on my home life, I guess, for this one, because I was talking to my wife about this, and I said she has no idea about any of this stuff. You know, we're in two different worlds as far as our interests are concerned, which is probably why, you know, we work. But I said to her, like, you know, have you seen this before? Because it dawned on me. I'm like, you know, obviously you're entrenched in it. I'm entrenched in all this stuff, right? All the conversations that I have on UAP here. But I'm like, I wonder if she's ever heard of this, because again, she's not in this field at all. And I showed it to her and she was like, oh, wow, what was that? So it kind of dawned on me. I'm like, there's a lot of people like my wife, the majority, honestly, who have never heard of this, who have never seen the videos and have no idea that this exists. So if you came across something like that, right? Let's say we're having dinner and my wife is there and she's like, so Ashton, tell me about this. What do you say to somebody like that who has just seen the video or heard of this for the very first time?
Yeah, great question. And I do know that there's, even though we've had tens of millions or hundreds of millions of views and impressions, it's still a very small percentage of the people out there that are even aware of this stuff. And that's the reason why the government can't make a statement on it. It's the reason why they have the media, the mainstream media, not talk to me. I think it's 100% intentional at this point. Because if they do that, then it wakes up a lot of people. And it's a very touchy subject. So, because a lot of people do want to show their loved ones and what have you. And so even when I talk to my family members and stuff like that aren't aware, it's like, okay, well, first of all, this is going to break your mind here. And you're going to, you know, this is going to be impossible to believe, but it's real. And then the way I go about it is the same way I went about with Glenn Beck, which is you look and you say, okay, start by proving the lie. You know, start by saying, you know, what do you think happened to the plane? What do you think the evidence is? And most people come up with this suicide pilot crashed in the ocean. The ocean's really big. And you realize this is just all programming that's been programmed into people. So you prove the lie. You say the United States government has to know. I mean, they've got satellites everywhere. We've got this SOSUS sound system that heard the Titan sub. We've got over-the-horizon radar they can see for thousands of miles. This plane was flying for 8 hours. And then that's when you dig into, you know, what really happened, which is, okay, here, have you seen this post about this guy talking about the fire event? He lays it out. You know, 2 videos, 19 witnesses, flight path indicates it, technical data indicates it. And then we also, you know, we have what's going on in the videos. So then the next part is, okay, you show them the orb videos and most people are going to go, oh, well, what is that, aliens? Or, you know, because it's so far beyond. They say, no, here's the science. It's macroscopic phase conjugation. This is consistent with electrical engineering. You know, Maxwell's equations were rewritten or reduced. And this is how all of this stuff is possible. And the hard part is that people then are like, okay, well, how long is the government hiding this? What kind of conspiracy are we dealing with here? And that's the part that really breaks most people. And there's not much you can do about it. It's a matter of waking people up. Because for a lot of people, the government to be lying about something this major really throws their whole worldview into question. Is that, okay, if they can lie about this, what else are they lying about? And I don't want to get too political with it, but you look at stuff, major stuff like COVID and what have you, and you go, okay, well, are they able to manipulate things on that grand of a scale? I think that people that look at these videos and realize that the government can hide, you know, have the whole media lie to you about a plane crashing into the ocean, which it never did. Then they can realize that, yeah, they can manipulate you on a major scale and they have very powerful control over the way that you think. And so then this is why I say it's really a matter of waking people up. It's not a situation where we have to invent some new physics or anything like that. We could maybe reimagine or slightly adjust the equations that we have. It's just a matter of saying this is already out there. All you have to go do is look, and you can come to the same conclusions I did. Like what MH370X did was just pull up old news articles, pull up news reports, pull up the old press conferences, went through everything piece by piece, and we took all the evidence in. We only ignored evidence, or not, we didn't ignore any evidence, actually. We only ruled out evidence that did not have any factual basis or support for it, which was the satellite pings after 1840 UTC. Everything else, this is the story pulls in all that, the witnesses that were ignored, the batteries, the plane descending, the flight path, all this stuff is like only consistent with this story. So if people can come up with a better story, if you want to challenge people, what you can say is, this is why I've made the evidence list publicly available, because whatever story you come up with, it's got to fit with that evidence list. You got to have an answer for everything on that evidence list, including the videos, the witnesses, all that stuff. And what you'll quickly come to the conclusion is that the story that has been put out here by me and the team is the one that makes the most sense.
Well, I think that's a pretty good closing statement, Ashton. It's, I mean, yeah, I say this all the time when we talk, but I could talk to you for another hour, another 2 hours. So we'll have to do this again if it's, if you're down with it. We can always come back and, do another conversation together. I'd also like to
Sounds
put
good.
out an open invitation, if you're down for it as well, to anybody who, of note that would like to come on and have a debate. I've tried to do this with Mick West. We know what Mick West is like. He wants to sit in his corner and just type on the computer and not actually face anybody. So it is what it is. I still put the challenge out to him. Come on, Mick.
Mhm.
I would love to have you on. But anybody of note who has come out against these claims and feels like they have counter proof against what Ashton is saying, I would love to host a debate. And I put that challenge out there to have you and someone else on here that would, be willing to go up against you in this conversation. If you're getting down with it, I am.
Yeah, I think you'd be a really good host. Honestly, I think the difficult part is just that it's multifaceted at this point. So it's
Mm.
like you have the MH370 videos, which you could have somebody like Mick West try to argue with, which I don't know how fruitful it would be, but maybe we can consider that. And then you have the MH370 case itself, which you might have someone like Larry Vance or Victor Ilanello or Mike Exner, one of these independent group people, or even Jeff Wise. Who knows? Jeff Wise would probably be the best on something like that. And then you also have the side of the science, where it's like and the science part is the one that I'd really like to do. I would like to have Eric Weinstein, Sabrine Hassenfelder, really any Brian Cox, I don't care. Any scientist that's out there, try to show or explain how this science can't be real. Why can't the ether be real? What is the scientific basis for why it can't be real? And I proposed these exact debates. Is that okay? Find somebody who can do it, because I can do all three. I'm a triple threat on this one.
Right.
Videos, MH370 case, science. I'm down for it. So yes, I appreciate that, and maybe we can set that up in the future. So if any of those people of any of those three spectrums want to debate about this, reach out to me, reach out to Steven, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Ashton, so much for all this. Tell everybody where they can find you if they haven't found you already.
Yeah, right down here at JustXAshton. You can find me on Twitter, where we're pushing 120,000 followers now. This thing's getting a lot of momentum. Or you can follow me on YouTube, which same, also JustXAshton as well. Been streaming pretty much like every other night or so, going through the science, going through the case, whatever. It's been awesome. So thank you everybody for following, and all the new followers, welcome.
Absolutely. Well, Ashton, thanks again for coming on here for, I think it's the fourth time that you come on UAP, and hopefully we can do a fifth and, keep up with each other as this goes on, because I don't believe we're anywhere close to done. So we'll definitely keep in touch on all this.
Sounds good. Thanks, Steven.
Thanks, Ashton.